Welcome back to another special episode of Mac Stories Unwind, the AV Club Town Hall Edition. That's quite a mouthful, but today we are going to be talking about the Apple TV show Silo, and I've got, of course, Jonathan Reed with me. Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm good. Great to be here again. Hi, John.
Yeah, good to talk to you. And David, who's a club member who joined us for the Slow Horses episode. So we've got David back to talk about Silo because he's been reading the books too. I understand, right, David?
I have read the first one, which is it's pretty close to half and half. It's pretty close to the first half of the book.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. Well, we'll get into all of that as well as a bunch of other things, but I want to welcome everybody here and remind everyone that once a month we do a special AV Club Town Hall, which is some media that's picked by our Club Mac Stories members in the club Discord. And so once we have kind of a consensus reached there as to what everybody wants to talk about, then we start preparing and watching the shows in this case, or reading a book or listening to music or whatever it happens to be. And then we record a live episode in our town hall in the club Discord and release it both as the early ad-free version of Mac Stories Unwind Plus, as well as the regular episode later in the week. So today's episode is going to be released later today once I get it edited as the Mac Stories Unwind Plus episode. And then this Friday, we'll get the usual version out as well, which will include an ad because that's how it works. That's how we support ourselves. Well, why don't we dive right into the show? Because I think there's a lot to talk about here. One of the things that's interesting to me about Silo is that as I was watching the show, I started realizing I'm watching an awful lot of Apple TV Plus shows lately. There's a lot. I think the quality level of what Apple's putting out is really quite high. I mean, there are some duds for sure. But as someone who heard that Apple was going to do a streaming service for video and having had the experience of Carpool Karaoke and the Planet of the Apps, I didn't have a lot of hopes for Apple TV Plus personally. And I got to say, they far exceeded those expectations. And I think that the quality of this show, I think this is, to me, Silo is one of the best shows that have come out. Now, we've talked about some other ones over time, but this is really right up there as one of my absolute favorites. It's not perfect, but I think it does a really amazing job. I mean, and maybe I'll turn it over to Jonathan briefly just to kind of do an overview of what, kind of what this show is all about and where it came from.
Yeah, so this show, Silo, is based on the series of Silo books by Hugh Howey, I believe is his name. This first season is based on roughly, and I think David's going to be able to fill us in on this, roughly the first half of the first book in that series called Wool, and it centers around a sort of dystopian future where sort of about 10,000 people live in a society underground in a silo, and they're sort of bound by there's various sort of regulations, and there's different levels of society, different classes. There's the people down at the bottom, keeping the silo running from in the generator, and then there's the people at the top making the laws, and there's all the people in between. So it's got a decent, should we say, metaphor for how life is in our world as well. The issue here is that no one really knows why they're in the silo, other than that it's poisonous outside, and you're not allowed to say that you want to go outside. Otherwise, you are forced to go outside and clean the camera systems which show everyone what is outside, show everyone the dystopian, destroyed world outside. And that's kind of lies the kind of the hook for the series, really, in that we're not really 100% sure if it is a sort of a wasteland outside. And as we go through the series, we find out extra little things about information being suppressed by the government and so forth. And how much is everyone being told? So that's kind of the setup. And I guess we're going to be talking about spoilers for the entire first season, right? Because the big reveal at the end of the season is quite significant, if I'm correct. So if you're listening now and you haven't watched Silo, go watch it and then come back and have a listen. It's on Apple TV. It's very good. So you're not going to be doing yourself a disservice. But yeah, I guess David, you've again done the same thing of watching a TV series and then reading the books. So I suppose we should ask you first your initial first impressions of the show, maybe from the first 2 or 3 episodes. What were your thoughts? Did it hook you in straight away?
Actually, it didn't.
All right.
The first two, I think the first two came out at the same time, and then they released one a week. And after watching the first two, I don't know why I tuned in again, but I thought, hey, this just isn't grabbing me. But I'm kind of, I don't think saying a sucker is the right thing, because I don't always watch shows like this, but there was something about it that caused me to tune in the next week. But it was, that's one of the things that's not really present in the book that I think was just a fantastic addition to the show, was this mystery that Juliet works on. And sorry if I'm jumping too far ahead in the topic, but that's one of the things that, as it went on, I found myself every week looking forward to when it came out. So when that last episode was delayed, I think they delayed it by 2 or 3 hours, I think, from what they usually released it. I'm like, oh man, now I can't watch it on Thursday because that's too late.
What were your initial first thoughts, John?
Yeah, it was interesting. It didn't really grab me right out of the gate either. It did and it didn't, I guess is how I would put it, because I really did find the story about the sheriff and his wife who were trying to have a child and both ending up going outside. I did find those characters and that plot line really interesting, and the developing suspicions about what was really going on in the silo and what all the stories really meant that people were told. And I found that really compelling, and having those 2 episodes having just then killed off those characters immediately did kind of turn me off. And it took me a while before I went back to the 3rd episode. I started the 3rd episode. I wasn't so sure that I was going to find this Juliet character compelling. And I took a month off or so. And then as the show had already just about wrapped up, I dove back in. And once I got through that 3rd episode, which is the one I think where Juliet fixes the generator, I was hooked again. And I started watching them like 2 to 4 at a time and finished up really quickly. And so it didn't really, I guess it didn't really grab me right out of the box. But I think what ultimately did attract me to the show was that it's a different kind of sci-fi, in the sense that it's pretty low key on the sci-fi aspect of it. I mean, it is set in a futuristic world, but it's also set in a very kind of, I guess, realistic, if you can call people living in a silo underground realistic, kind of a realistic world that felt more about the characters and the people and the mystery, kind of a small town mystery, than it did feel about, what a lot of sci-fi shows are all about, which are about, robots and spaceships.
Oh, sorry. I was going to jump in, John, because that was the thing that I thought as I watched it too, is I thought, this is obviously science fiction, but I think there's been enough things like, I can't remember what the names are, but, we've had enough experiments, social experiments, like, can humans survive inside of a dome, these self-contained systems. And that's what I thought. The way that they portray it is, it's not this in-your-face technology where you have to learn vocabulary and new rules and things like that. So it is science fiction-y, but it's also very relatable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's true. Very true. How about you, Jonathan? What do you think?
I slightly different than you guys actually. The first two episodes I really kind of hooked me in because I kind of appreciated the slow kind of drip of little teasers of information that there might be something else going on that we're not quite being shown here. And I do really like a style of storytelling where it's the man behind the curtain style of storytelling where there's you get the feeling that there's someone else pulling the strings that you haven't seen, who's sort of behind the scenes. And the shows like Lost was always one that I really liked, despite its various meanderings. It did have that sense of something else going on behind the scenes that you're not quite aware of. And initially, the first two episodes, Rashida Jones and David Oyelowo, who are really fantastic actors, really hooked me in. I was almost kind of sad that they both died, and I was actually convinced that they were going to come back until towards the end of the show, which we'll talk about later. Which it seems that potentially they won't. But then the third episode kind of took a completely different turn and was one of the most nerve-wracking hours of TV I've seen in a long time. Which I was not expecting at all. I thought it was going to be a completely different style of episode, but somehow the way it was shot and sort of directed was really tense and had me sort of hooked in. I was very keen to see what they were going to do next. And then it seemed like the first 3 or 4 episodes, they always seemed to be killing someone off, which was they got rid of, I think, 4 or 5 characters in the first 4 episodes who were supposedly meant to be main characters. So that was quite shocking, really. But it kind of had me from the beginning, really. And I did appreciate how it didn't feel like they were making it up as they go along, which I guess was the case because they were going from the books.
This episode of Mac Stories Unwind is brought to you by Collide. If you work in security or IT and your company has Okta, this message is for you. Have you noticed that for the past few years, the majority of data breaches and hacks you read about have something in common? It's employees. Hackers absolutely love exploiting vulnerable employee devices and credentials, but it doesn't have to be that way. Imagine a world where only secure devices can access your cloud apps. In this world, phished credentials are useless to hackers, and you can manage every OS, even Linux, from a single dashboard. Best of all, you can get employees to fix their own device security issues without creating more work for your IT department. The good news is you don't have to imagine this world. You can start living this world right now by using Collide. Collide is a device trust solution for companies with Okta, and it ensures that if a device isn't trusted and secure, it can't log into your cloud apps. Visit collide.com/MacStoriesUnwind to watch a demo and see how it works. That's KOLIDE.com/MacStoriesUnwind. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show.
To go back to mentioning about Lost again, a lot of the time you felt that they were maybe just making up mysteries who they were going to figure out how to solve later. Whereas with this, right, you really got a sense that there was a definite plan behind what was happening. And you also felt very much like Juliet. You kind of knew as much as she did. She wasn't really aware of any more information that you weren't. And you didn't know anything she didn't really. Not too much anyway. So it felt like a very well-staged storyline. So yeah, I was kind of in from the beginning, really. So yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, I think, in the end, it did really hook me as well. And I think obviously these, unlike Lost, this show is based on a book. So there's an existing roadmap, and it's not a new book. What's really interesting to me is that Wool, which is the first book in this trio of books, this trilogy, was self-published on Amazon, and was one of the very early self-publishing books to really take off and take the publishing world by storm, because it's at the time that happened in, I think it was maybe 2010, 2011, something like that. That was pretty unusual. I mean, it's a lot more common today, but it was definitely a different kind of book back then.
Yeah, I think they even they started actually developing this as a film and various TV series adaptations from about 2012, and even had people like Ridley Scott involved back in the day. So it's been around for a while, and you can kind of see why. It does have a good hook for the idea for the show, and then because it's a big society, you've kind of got endless stories that you could tell, really. So it's a great sort of starting point for the show. And I think another thing that I really loved immediately from the beginning was the production design of the show. The visual look of it was really gorgeous, and the winding staircase, which I believe in the books isn't a winding staircase, it's just a staircase. And I think just the way it was designed was very, very cool, and very much appreciated all the little gadgets, the very tactile feel to it, everything. The sort of old screens that they used, sort of almost DOS style screens. Really, really nice. So that kind of kept me in as well as the storyline as well. So was there any other things that you really liked in the show, David?
Yeah, I really liked the sets as well, because and that might have been why I stuck with it, is because there's something, even though they're in that an enclosed space, a silo, but there was just something, I don't know, that really appealed to me. I don't know. I felt a little bit like a little kid watching it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Forbidden Planet. It's an old movie from the 60s. And I remember it was on one of the local stations when I was a kid on a Saturday, and I saw it and I watched it, and I just absolutely loved the world that it built. And that was the same kind of feeling that I got with this, is that there was something really cool about it. But again, it's, a lot of times I'll watch something that I'll like, and my wife and I have different tastes, but seeing how popular this has been, I told her, I'm like, hey, you might want to watch this. This is really, there were a few weeks that this was more popular than Ted Lasso, which is a show that she really liked as well, where we had some crossover. So I thought, hey, give this a shot, because it's not a hard sci-fi kind of show.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an important point, and one that really gives this a broader based appeal than maybe something like Foundation, for instance, which I'm a big fan of too, but it is very much more in some respects, a more traditional sci-fi show, which has its place, of course, but Silo does really kind of reach broader, and I do think they do a very nice job with the show of instilling mystery throughout it, which, it's just little things, and they don't browbeat you with it too much, but it's things like the fact that any item from the before times, is considered dangerous and a criminal act to own, and the fact that history has essentially been erased, and what's going on with that, and why would you want the history to be erased? And those questions, while the answers maybe have been hinted at here and there, have not really been answered. So I think that the show really does a nice job of leaving us hanging at the end of season 1, wanting more from Silo.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think what was one thing that was interesting to talking about the little things that are banned is one of the item that seemed to be the most amazing thing that anyone on the show had ever seen was purely just a magazine with pictures of a beach and things like that, right. which initially you think, oh, well, it's just a magazine. But then if you take a step back and reframe it from the point of view of the characters, you realize actually how amazing that must be if they've just lived within these walls their entire life. And that's sci-fi, but it's a very human grounding within the show, and it's very very simple way to sort of instill a sense of wonder within the characters. And I really liked little touches like that, where like the Pez dispenser as well was something that they were constantly puzzled about what it was. And it was just, well, it's a Pez dispenser. It's nothing particularly fascinating, but they just seemed really fascinated by what it actually was. And I like those little touches throughout the show. I think we should probably talk about the characters as well. So I was disappointed to see the sheriff and his wife disappear for, early on, but I really liked Juliet, and I actually found Common quite a good character as well. I wasn't quite sure how his acting would be, but he was pretty good. How what other characters were you sort of drawn to, John?
Yeah, I think Juliet, being the main protagonist in the show, really is really well portrayed, and a great character. As I understand it, George, who is her love interest in the show, was not in the book, and that the idea, in part, I think, with George, was to maybe take a little bit of the hard edge off of Juliet as a character from the books. Maybe David could speak to that a little bit, but. I found George probably a little bit more of a hollow character, in the sense that you part of that's intentional, because you don't really know what his intentions are, and you start understanding that more as the show progresses, and what his motivations are and that sort of thing. But I think Juliet, who was played by, what's her name, Cara Ferguson,
Rebecca Ferguson, yeah,
Rebecca Ferguson. Sorry. Rebecca Ferguson did a remarkable job, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were awards given for the show, including for the acting and portrayal of that role.
Yeah, she really does kind of anchor the show, doesn't she? I think you needed a really strong character, really sort of magnetic performance, because she's a very physically strong person as well, as well as mentally. So yeah, I think she did a fantastic job, really, and got pretty ripped for it as well. So it's I think the first shot where you see her in the end of episode 1, I think it is, when she's stepping out of the generator downstairs in the basement, and it's sort of at an angle where you sort of see her biceps. And I was like, whoa, Rebecca Ferguson's been working out. She's looking big arms, yeah. And I think that along with her performance, it gives you a real idea of a really strong character. And yeah, it's interesting actually what you said about the love interest. So is that the case in the book, David? Did you find maybe her character have a little hard edges, maybe? Do you think it was maybe a good idea to add in this romantic character?
I do, because I think at creating that mystery is a much better, it solves a problem that books have when they become movies, because a lot you can explain things in a book that you can communicate to the reader that are obvious, it makes sense. But if someone's thinking something, a lot of things can take place in the character's head, but there's not an effective way of doing that in a movie. And I've read that some people said, oh, well, we did it this way in this movie. And I thought, yeah, it was better than most, but it still wasn't as good as a regular movie would have been. And I thought that was a really good way of exposing Juliet's character and getting essentially at the same mystery. And it's the same mystery, but they talk about certain individuals and they come and go really quickly. Like Juliet's dad is in the book, but the story of her moving away and not liking him and all of that isn't in the book. And so I think it does make a really good way of filling out her character, and between that and people that she cares for. For example, and I don't want to talk too much about this, because if I wonder about it too much, I might inadvertently spoil what may be coming in season 2, because it's definitely in the book. But the guy that she talks to, that she always sees on those late nights up in the cafeteria, that's keeping track of the stars, he becomes a really big character in the second half. And it's very similar.
Yeah, I feel that there was a lot. They were setting up that character for a lot, because he didn't really do a lot in this first season. He just seemed to be very much enjoying the stars a lot. And it was only sort of right at the end he sort of got pulled in for maybe fraternizing with her, but again, not really by that much. So yeah, I think I'm imagining I could imagine that his character will become a lot bigger. I'd certainly like to see a lot more of the of engineering as well. I enjoyed that the group of characters that were down there. They certainly had they're certainly fun characters. So I'd like to see that in season 2 as well. So yeah, I think we should probably dive into the big reveal at the end, which I think calls back to the whole mystery of this season. Which, just to recap, we were kind of led to believe that maybe outside wasn't as it was shown on the screens, which was a sort of a wasteland, and that actually it was, a beautiful sort of paradise. That was hinted at many, many times. But actually what happens is that Juliet goes out and finds out that the video, or that the visor that they put on the people who go out, actually fools them into thinking it is very nice, and actually it is exactly as the window shows everyone in the silo, and it's still a wasteland. Which I watched it with my wife, and we both had to pause it a second to take a second to take that in, because that was a huge twist which I did not see coming at all. And I think really sets up the next season with the reveal also that they are just one of what seems many, many silos. So I guess we're going to see people in other silos in the next season. John, how did you react to that reveal at the end? Did you see it coming?
Yeah, I didn't see that coming at all, and it really I found it very disorienting and confusing, really, because I was convinced that obviously there was some sort of nice world outside the walls of the silo, and that everybody who had gone out to clean were all out there doing their own thing and had their own community or something like that, and that turns out not to be the case at all, and it just kind of ends there, which is just incredibly shocking, really. And I do wonder whether what's going on is, my only theory, I guess, is that the screen in the cafeteria is designed to keep most people from wanting to go outside the silo and to control them, and that the hard drive that was found earlier in the series and had a video on it of the nice outdoors, that somehow is designed to capture the rest of the people who are curious and don't believe what they see in the cafeteria, to capture them and eliminate them, and have control over both types of people. But that's all. That's just obviously speculation. That's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, I'm really. It makes me really want to watch season 2. I can't wait for that to come out.
Yeah, I know. That's they just started up filming, I think, back in May, and then they've had to shut down, obviously, with the strike. So I think it's going to be a bit of a long wait. But I'm very keen, probably. Very very keen to see that. I think what was very clever about that twist is that they dropped the hints about potentially outside being all okay and no all looking very beautiful. But they dropped it in a way that wasn't really that obvious. So it kind of hinted at it and almost gave you a little bit of credit by sort of making you think that. So that when they pulled this switch at the end, it was so unexpected. I think the way they did that was really, really brilliant. But David, you, as someone who's read the book, and I read a brief summary of sort of the first half of the book, I believe it's not actually done that way. I think, do you find out quite early on what's going on outside?
Yes, when the sheriff's wife is sent out to clean, and I'm trying to remember exactly the detail, but I believe she is she's having a hard time breathing, and so she gets something. She pulls something off of her suit. She reaches up, I think, on the back of the helmet and pulls something off and is able to pry the faceplate off. And so very early that she's seeing something that doesn't match the reality and that the screen really is showing the reality. And that's primarily why when someone is sent out to clean, most people say, well, I'm not going to clean. You're sending me out to die. Why most of them will actually go clean. And that's what I thought was really well done in the show when Juliet walks up to the camera and you think she's going to clean and then she drops the wool cloth and it's obvious that she's not going to clean. It was a lot more dramatic because in the book she just starts walking up the hill. There's not any of that in there. And again, I think that's something that works really well in the show that wasn't necessarily needed in the book, but the finding out about multiple silos is something that you find out. If I remember correctly, and I think I'd remember it better because I just read it not that long ago. But you start to get an idea of, hey, there's something else going on here right before Juliet goes out. So you get the sense that, not only do you know that it really is bad outside the whole time, but when they're sending her out to clean, like that note that is left with her suit when she starts putting it on about they're good at that says they're good in supply. I'm like, what does that mean? Because the whole time watching the show, I was convinced that, hey, they wouldn't have gotten actors of this stature to play the first sheriff and his wife to just kill them off. So I thought they've got to be coming back. So I kept considering all of these possibilities of, well, I don't know, could it be this? Could it be this? So I had a sense that something was coming, and then when they send her out to clean, and you realize no, she could die out there. That's when I realized, oh man, there's something entirely else going on, and I thought it was nice to be surprised and not think, I kind of had that idea that this was going on, and maybe it's one of those cases of where The Sixth Sense was one of those movies that had a twist that all of a sudden people start thinking, oh, okay, well, what's the twist? Because that's started being, in my opinion, more prominent in movies and shows. Maybe this is where you kind of come back and start realizing, well, no, there isn't the same, it's not the twist that you think that it is, and it's really not that big. But yeah, it was different, and I liked it.
Yeah, I thought that's a really good way of putting it, David. I think it's one of the best endings, I think, to a season I've seen in a very long time, because it does such a good job of making you anticipate the next season, and it really is a shame that it's going to be put off further because of the strikes, but understandable too.
Yeah, no, I think that I'm definitely looking forward to the next season, to actually finding out what's going on in the other silos. I suspect we're going to be meeting lots more different characters and and probably lots of other different dynamics as well. So I think going forward that should be quite exciting to discover. So yeah, I'm very excited for that. And what a great show. What good makeup as well. I have to credit my next door neighbor is a makeup artist on this show. So,
oh, okay. How about that?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, very well done. Making everybody look a little gritty and grimy there, I think, which is one of the vibes of the show in a lot of parts. But yeah, no, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
cool.
She does some good muck makeup.
All right. I think that's probably a good place to stop for this episode. I want to thank both Jonathan and David for joining me, and our sponsor, Collide, for supporting the show. As I said at the outset, we will have this out later today as part of the Mac Stories Unwind Plus feed, and then on Friday for everyone else. And with that, I will leave you both. Thank you, Jonathan, for coming and joining me today.
Great to be here again.
And thank you too, David.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Talk to you later, everyone.